Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Gripe, the show where I do short, sweet movie reviews of new movies, plus the one thing that annoyed me the most. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about James Bond himself. Daniel Craig as James Bond in the newest James Bond installment. I think it's Bond 23 at this point, and that would be Spectre. So, a little bit of background. If you haven't seen any James Bond movies, I don't know who you are, and you shouldn't be watching my show. I'm kidding. Everyone's welcome. Um, James Bond movies obviously have been around for quite a long time, and whenever there's a new one coming out, it's a big to do. This one I was extremely excited about because it has Daniel Craig coming back as Bond for the fourth time, as well as Sam Mendes doing his second straight Bond movie, which is kind of a surprise because after the first one you'd figure Sam Mendes would be completely wiped out, but he came back for this one, and just with the cast that they have, Christoph Waltz, Dave Bautista, Lea Seydoux, and Monica Bellucci, as well as Ray Fiennes, Naomi Campbell, Roy Kinnear, Ben Whishaw, reprising their roles. It really got me excited about, there's a lot of promise in this movie. Um, as just kind of a background, without giving away too many of the spoilers, um, the movie really does feel like a sequel to Skyfall. Just to say that. If you haven't seen Skyfall, you probably should before going into this one because kind of the same way that Quantum of Solace felt like a direct sequel to Casino Royale, this feels almost like a direct sequel to Skyfall. But at the same time, it also brings those three movies together. It takes all of the Daniel Craig movies and kind of lumps them together, which, without going into too much detail, could speak to the whole James Bond is a code name theory, but I'm not going to get into that one. So the movie itself is James Bond is kind of going rogue a little bit, which, surprise. And he's, basically tracking down this lead that who's played by Judi Dench in the previous films, gave him this lead to basically, find out, who is behind all this, because M was, working on it. And so, she basically gives Bond this directive to find this, and Bond kind of goes rogue and creates a big issue in Mexico City, which, forces him to be grounded, but that doesn't stop him from continuing his search for, the people who are behind, what's going on. And so he basically tracks down, the source of where this is coming from, and he goes to Rome, against all directives to find out who is behind all of these things. And when I say all these things, I mean it's the stuff that went on in Skyfall. It's who is launching these terrorist attacks, and who nearly blew up a stadium in Mexico City. There's somebody behind all this, and he goes to Rome and finds the organization who is behind this. And at the time, they're not named yet, but he does find kind of the person who is behind everything, the guy who's in charge of it all. And he narrowly escapes, but at this point he's trying to track down who is this guy, who is this organization. And he goes back to a character who initially showed up in Casino Royale and has since become kind of an afterthought, but now he's hiding off in the woods. Mr. White, he's hiding in the woods in Austria, and basically says, okay, this is who you're looking, go find my daughter, protect her, and she'll kind of help you find who you're looking for. So he does. He goes and meets his daughter, and nearly gets her killed. And it kind of sets off this mystery of who are these people, and ultimately they encounter the villain, who's played by Christoph Waltz. Go figure. And that's when all is revealed of who this guy is, what his intentions are, and all this. Because this organization, which is called Spectre, if you haven't seen Bond movies, then you'd have no idea what I'm talking about. But if you have seen Bond movies, you're like, duh. Spectre is basically behind all of these terrorist attacks because they want to push for this global intelligence pact to go through. And by creating this global intelligence pact, they're kind of the ones overseeing it. They're the puppet masters. And by having this, they'll basically have unlimited access to surveillance all over the world. So it's, one of those, kind of invasion of privacy, stealing information, stealing secrets kind of movie. And Bond basically uncovers who it is and fights the bad guy at the end, saves the girl, and all is well in Bondland. So that's the basic plot, and if it sounded a little muddled, that's because it was. The plot of this movie was very incoherent. Part of it's because, again, it feels like a direct sequel to Skyfall, which, again, if you haven't seen Skyfall, doesn't really it doesn't really make a lot of sense of like, okay, what's going on here? Why is this all important? Who are these people? But almost from the get-go, you think, okay, they're trying to tie all these things together inorganically. Casino Royale, they were kind of setting up that, Lashif worked for this, Lashif and Mr. White both worked for this organization. And you think, oh, it's Spectre. And then Quantum of Solace comes out and it turns out it's Quantum, whoever the hell they are. And, Mr. Green, whoever, whatever the, Green character, I even forgot his first name. He turns out to be the head of this quantum organization that's a Spectre kind of organization. But again, they turn out to be nothing. So it's like, okay, whatever. And then they go to Skyfall, and Skyfall just has its own contained story, which might be why it was so good, is because it just was its own story. But now you get into Spectre, which obviously they're bringing Spectre out of the shadows, and they say, who's been behind all this? It's been Spectre. It's been this, main villain, who I really should not spoil the secret, or the twist. But if you've seen Bond movies, you already know the twist. Let's just put it that way. And, it's been like, oh, we've been behind all this. Lashif, Green, Silva. We've been behind all these people. And they've all been, there to challenge you, Bond, which, I'm not going to lie, did not sit well with me because it just felt so tacked on. It really did. It felt like, okay, you took all these and just kind of threw them in here and said, okay, now we're Spectre. Now it is, which is, for the Bond fan, it's like, yes, I'm, finally back to Spectre, which, from the very first Bond movie was the organization behind it. But for the three Daniel Craig movies and, for a while since, it's just been this, kind of ghost. It hasn't actually been there. Or when they tease it, it turned out to be Quantum, which wasn't anywhere near as interesting. So, obviously, I have a few problems with this movie. And to pick one is going to be a little bit of a challenge. Let me back up just a little bit. I did enjoy the movie as a Bond movie, but as kind of a continuing story, I thought that it felt really inorganic, and I felt like it just was like, well, let's try to connect all these things very loosely. And I'm sure that through a second viewing, I'll be able to actually catch some more of this, but I can tell that, they really, really were grasping to make this feel like feel like the real Spectre. Whereas, in Doctor No, when Doctor No tells him who he works for, who he works for Spectre, it's very much just like, this is who we are. You're just gonna deal with it. We are Spectre. We are this massive organization. We are the puppet masters, and you're gonna deal with it. Whereas here, it's like, surprise, all this stuff that, didn't seem to have any connection whatsoever, or, turned out to be Quantum. No, it was actually Spectre all along. And it just felt like it was a very weird Jack in the Box surprise. Um, and that's not even my key gripe. Here I am griping about the movie, it's not even my key gripe. But before I get to that, I'll just say, the action was pretty good. It definitely felt a little bit cheesy at times, but I will give them credit for one thing. There were a lot more natural stunts than there were CGI stunts, which I think helps because, you know, you watch some of the movies that are coming out these days, these Fast and Furious movies that are just amping up the ridiculous, which is fun. It's fine. But I'm glad to see that there are still people out there who want to, kind of bring it down to earth again. And ultimately, the movie felt really, it was kind of slow at times, but it felt more like an old-fashioned Bond movie. Kind of like, halfway through the movie, I'm like, is this just a remake of From Russia with Love? Like, it just felt like that sometimes, had that kind of old school Bond feel to it, which is good. Daniel Craig is a good looking Bond. He's a good looking Bond. But this is where my key gripe comes in. He cannot speak Bond. Bond has a personality. Bond has that suave, kind of cheeky personality about him. He's suave. Daniel Craig is definitely suave, but he is not cheeky. He does not have that sense of humor. And I've often dismissed this about Daniel Craig because the movies he's made are pretty good. Casino Royale is awesome. Skyfall is awesome. Quantum of Solace is actually a little underrated. I thought it was enjoyable. It's, really fast paced and, frenetic, but it's actually not a bad movie. This one, though, I don't think I can give him the benefit of the doubt because every time he tries to be like kind of, you know, funny, it doesn't work at all. There's like no humor out of that man. And it's in this movie it really shows that it's almost like he doesn't care. Like I think either Daniel Craig doesn't care or just the writing of this movie was just that poor that they could not get him to be somewhat charismatic and fun. It's all just very, his one-liners are just kind of delivered with a, you know, it's like, huh? It's like I don't get it. So that's my key gripe is that I don't know if it was the writing or Daniel Craig or what, but Bond is not likable in this movie at all. He's, definitely classy, but he's not likable, which is not something I want from a Bond. Even in the other Daniel Craig movies, he was at least somewhat likable. In this one, there really wasn't much to cling on to, and that hurts because I love Bond so much. I've seen every Bond movie, every one. I love him so much. So it hurts when a Bond movie doesn't live up to my expectations, but at the same time, expectations for this movie were way too high. But that's because of all the elements that went into it. Um, Otherwise, enjoyable movie, definitely, positive, but certainly not the movie that it could have been. I'd probably give it 6 stars out of 10, which puts it right up there with movies like, some of the better, some of the Sean Connery movies or, the Timothy Dalton movies, something like that. But 6 out of 10, not a very good score. But oh well, that's my review of Spectre. So thanks a lot for watching. Hope to see you next time on Key Gripe. Keep watching the movies.